In addition to spending millions making The Wizard of Oz, MGM concealed the facts for decades. Only 3 of the 11 writers the studio employed were given credit. To hide their errors, they destroyed film and removed directors. In addition to laboring in appalling conditions, the Munchkin actors received lower pay than the dog. Despite being replaced and almost dying, the voice of one actor is still heard in the film. The most startling secret, however, is that the studio concealed everything, and fans are still unaware of the whole story. L. Ron Bell had no idea what he had begun when he released The Wonderful Wizard of Oz in 1900. A filing cabinet at his office with the labels A to G, H to N, and O to Z is where the title originated. Within 8 months, the first 10,000 copies of the book were sold out. More than 3 million copies had been sold by 1956. It quickly earned the title of America's favorite homegrown fairy tale. And it was before musicals and movies. A Broadway adaptation of the book drew enormous audiences just 2 years after its publication. Dorothy and Toto's magic was already in place. When Disney's Snow White astonished the world in 1937, everything altered once more. It wasn't merely a success. In the US alone, it earned more than $8 million. MGM paid attention. Arthur Freed thought The Wizard of Oz would even surpass Disney's popularity as a musical. For Judy Garland, he also required something significant. In early 1938, MGM paid a record $75,000 for the rights. There were 4 other studios vying for it as well. Even if fantasy movies were still dangerous, MGM didn't want to fall behind. MGM aspired to dominate living fantasy since Disney dominated animation. However, there weren't many surprises in the original Oz MGM planned. They informed William H., a youthful assistant, to take away the magic, use a canon. Fantasy movies were rarely successful at the time. They therefore made an effort to give Oz a realistic vibe. According to his draft, the Tin Man was a criminal who was imprisoned in a metal suit for all time. The Scarecrow couldn't do anything else, so he was simply a fool stuck scaring birds. The protagonist wasn't even Dorothy. A cursed prince who battled dragons was the Cowardly Lion. Aunt Em was unkind. In contrast to the happy world people adored in the book, it was gloomy and depressing. MGM eventually took a different route. They restarted and restored the magic. Obtaining a finished script was equally chaotic. MGM discreetly engaged multiple authors to collaborate on it simultaneously. Everybody had a different view. There were those who desired more music. Others desired more fantasy or reality. Dorothy was hardly present in one rendition. It was written by at least 11 authors. It began with William H. Cannon. Ogden Nash, a poet, followed. Screenwriters such as Herman Mankiewicz, Florence Ryerson, and Noel Langley. The producer, Arthur Freed, penned pages as well. Sometimes they had no idea what the others were doing. Only Langley, Ryerson, and Edgar Allan Wolff were ultimately given credit, but Yip Harburg, the songwriter, put everything together right before the movie started. On October 8, 1938, the final version was locked in. The Wizard of Oz received more funding from MGM than any other film they had previously produced. $2.7 million, or more than $60 million in today's currency, was the ultimate budget. They made use of creative tunes, well-known filmmakers, and brand new visual effects. The risk was enormous. The filming process was lengthy and fraught with issues. Employees were let go. Scenes were reshot. The scripts were constantly changing. MGM was afraid the movie wouldn't work. They were aware that it must be flawless. Another issue was casting Dorothy. The first pick was Shirley Temple. Despite being America's sweetheart, she lacked the strength to sing. The next was the gifted vocalist Deanna Durbin, but her studio refused to let her leave. Judy Garland, who was only 16 at the time, was cast in the role. However, she no longer had a childlike appearance. They offered her a tight corset to flatten her chest in order to correct it. To appear younger, she also applied a lot of makeup. Later, Garland claimed that breathing was difficult because of the corset. Worse, Early makeup experiments attempted to make her resemble a doll with odd colors and light hair. She referred to it as her Frankenstein appearance. Fortunately, those thoughts were abandoned. Ray Boulier had always wanted to portray the Scarecrow, but he was initially chosen as the Tin Man. Because of his vaudeville past, his body moved like rubber. He pleaded with the producers to change. The Scarecrow's cast member, Buddy Epson, concurred. However, catastrophe came when Epson began working as the Tin Man. The aluminum powder in his makeup poisoned him, causing his lungs to fail, necessitating weeks in hospitalization. To replace him, Jack Haley was brought in. Epson lost his chance due to the makeup, whereas Boulier was given his ideal role. Even the evil witch underwent significant transformation. MGM initially hoped she would be attractive. After being cast, Gail Sundergaard appears in wardrobe testing, wearing elegant gowns that exude mystery. However, test audiences believed that a gorgeous witch would not be frightening. The witch became hideous after MGM veered off track. Surgard gave up. Margaret Hamilton, a sharp-faced, serious acting former teacher, took over. She consented to donning frightening prosthetics and green face paint. She was severely injured when a fire effect failed during one of the stunts. Nevertheless, she came back to complete her scenes. Her performance was remembered for a long time. Throughout the entire movie, the Munchkin sequences were among the most intricate. More than 120 small individuals were employed. The majority of them had experience in theater or circus. English was not spoken by everyone. They wore sexy costumes and worked long days. Their weekly pay was between $50 to $100, which was less than that of the dog Toto, who earned $125. For years, there were rumors of crazy parties, but the majority of them were simply worn out and homesick. Some complained about subpar housing and treatment. Many made history with their musical numbers, yet they weren't even given credit in the movie. A group of surviving Munchkin actors received a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2007, decades after the original film was made. The Wizard of Oz performed in small communities distant from the spotlight before anyone ever heard Judy Garland sing about a place over the rainbow. The original version of the picture was screened on August 11, 1939, in Dennis, Massachusetts, and Kenosha, Wisconsin. It was shown a day later in a tiny Oconom theater with only a few hundred seats. These were trials. Before the final cut, MGM sought candid input from everyday people, and it was successful. By pointing out what worked and what didn't, viewers helped create what would become a classic. These previews were followed by a cut of about 20 minutes of video. It got ingrained in the memories of those communities' residents. They had the privilege of being the first people in Hollywood to see Oz. The grand premiere followed. The movie eventually debuted at Grauman's Chinese Theater on August 15, 1939. It was created an event by MGM. Fans were crammed into bleachers, and there were red carpets and spotlights. It launched nationwide 10 days later. With an estimated budget of $277,000, it was the most costly film MGM had ever produced. However, despite the crowded cinemas, the film only generated about $3 million during its initial run. It became evident that the studio had not actually turned a profit when they took into account the money spent on promotion. MGM described it as a letdown. Only with the 1949 re-release did the film start to turn a profit. Although the people adored it at the time, it nearly failed financially. Almost never did one of the most well-known tunes in film history make it. Filming for Over the Rainbow began on October 7, 1938. However, the studio head wanted to edit the initial version of the film because it was too long. It slowed down the film, he claimed. Judy Garland's greatest moment was briefly in jeopardy, but composer Harold Arlen and assistant producer Arthur Ferridet made a valiant effort to preserve it. They were aware of its meaning. The song endured, took home the Oscar, and swiftly gained international popularity. It provided American soldiers hope during the war and was at the top of the music charts by March 1940. It became part of history rather than merely existing in the movie. The music and color didn't quite please the critics. Many reviews complimented the songs and images when it was initially published in 1939, but deemed the plot to be lacking. Some claimed it was only suitable for young audiences, particularly in light of Disney's Snow White. However, on November 3, 1956, something occurred. The movie was initially shown on television by CBS. That night, more than 45 million people watched. It became a tradition after that one telecast. Every year, families started watching it. Opinions evolved over time. What was once questioned became a representation of American society. It was no longer only a film. It served as a unifying factor across generations. Despite being a huge smash, The Wizard of Oz received 5 Oscar nominations in 1940. That year, Gone with the Wind took home 8 honors, including Best Picture. Only 2 awards were given to Oz: Best Original Score and Best Original Song. Not even the Best Actress nomination went to Judy Garland. Oz appeared to have lost at the moment, but as the years went by, the roles were reversed. Oz ended up being the most popular movie. It didn't need a prize to establish its place in history. Its music, colors, and heart were stronger than the accolades. But there was a cost to the illusion on TV. In the well-known poppy field scene, Dorothy and her pals are awakened by the soft falling of white snow. It had a lovely appearance. That snow was actually comprised entirely of asbestos. Asbestos was marketed as artificial snow for decorations in stores back then. Nobody was aware of its risk. The actors stood on it, inhaled it, and allowed it to cover their flesh and clothing. We now know that a single exposure to asbestos in the air can result in fatal illnesses. Unknowingly, that moment of awe was among the riskiest scenes ever captured on camera. The Tin Man's original cast member nearly passed away. In order to get the metallic appearance, Buddy Ebsen was selected for the role and had aluminum powder dusted on his skin every day. A little more than a week later, he was out of breath. After being taken to the hospital, he was put in an oxygen tent. He had deteriorating lungs. He never came back to the set. MGM turned to an aluminum paste and subtly replaced him with Jack Haley. It remained unsafe. Haley developed a severe eye infection in the end. All of this occurred merely to give one character a dazzling appearance. Although it was movie magic, there was actual suffering involved. One of the worst injuries was sustained by the woman who portrayed the Wicked Witch of the West. In a cloud of flames and scarlet smoke, Margaret Hamilton had to vanish. However, something went wrong on the second take. Her costume caught fire because the fire started too early. Her face and hands were badly burned. She needed 6 weeks to recuperate. To make matters worse, the green cosmetics she used was poisonous and created with copper. Doctors advised her not to get it in her wounds, and she was not allowed to eat solid food while wearing it. Her complexion remained green-tinted for months. It was risky. It wasn't just makeup. In Solitude, Bert L., who portrayed the Cowardly Lion, suffered. His costume weighed about 60 pounds and was composed of real lion skin. It was even heavier, according to some. He would perspire constantly under the intense studio lights. He was tired from the outfit-trapping heat. He had to use a straw to consume his food because he was unable to sit comfortably. The costume had to be aired out at the end of each day because it smelled so awful. Nevertheless, he continued to wear it for months. In real life, the look was agony, yet it worked on television. Ray Boulier's face suffered as a result of becoming the Scarecrow. Every day, the makeup artist applied a latex mask straight to his skin. The crosshatch stitching gave it the appearance of burlap. The process of taking it off was laborious and slow after hours of filming. His face developed creases from it that persisted for more than a year. According to some, the marks never completely went away. During filming, more than 100 of those masks were worn. There was a concealed pain in his happy dance down the yellow brick path. Although The Wizard of Oz is regarded as a happy classic, the stories that lie behind its vibrant sceneries are anything but. The jitterbug, a dance routine, was one of the most unexpected defeats. It lasted roughly 6 minutes and was filmed in 1938. After being bitten by a magic insect, Dorothy and her pals were instructed to dance wildly in the haunting woodland. The performance featured quick jazz music, vibrant costumes, and intricate dancing. However, it was removed from the finished film after much effort. Studio bosses believed it would slow down the tale and make it feel too modern. Nearly everything was destroyed. In an ancient trailer, only around 2 seconds survived. A few still images and hazy rehearsal videos are also included. The 1965 MGM Vault fire destroyed much of the studio's library, including the majority of the outtakes. The only obvious reminder now is a brief phrase in the completed movie, where the evil witch claims that she sent a small insect to Hat to weaken their resolve. Significant alterations were also made to the lyrics of songs that the general public was unaware of. Even though there are only 3 listed authors, at least 11 additional people contributed without getting credit for rewriting sequences, adding humor, or making the songs better. Yes, by repeating "There's No Place Like Home," Harburg, officially known only as the lyricist, generated the idea of Dorothy returning home. The scenario in which the Scarecrow, Tin Man, and Lion received their medal, diploma, and heart was also written by him. The original design did not include that time. When casting decisions became ambiguous, it was swiftly added. In The Land of Oz, there were even more characters and complete competitions that were created, recorded, and then taken out. Little paperwork survives since these adjustments were made so quickly. The majority of what we now know is derived from cut scene fragments and discarded screenplays. The first actor to portray the Tin Man was Buddy Ebsen, who went on to become well known as Jet Clampett. He spent weeks working on the movie and recording all of his songs, but the makeup almost killed him. He had to be admitted to the hospital due to a serious allergic response brought on by the aluminum dust. Jack Haley took over. Here's the odd thing though, Buddy's voice was not re-recorded for the group songs, such as We're Off to See the Wizard. This indicates that Ebsen's voice is used whenever the Tin Man sings in those group lines. His voice is present in all versions of the film, but his face is never shown. His solo rendition of If I Only Had a Heart is even featured on some early DVD soundtracks. His singing is still there, subtly concealed in plain sight, but his film is no longer there. Additionally, there was a relationship that was never seen on TV. Early drafts intended for Dorothy's affection for the Scarecrow to go beyond simple friendship. She was supposed to bid farewell to Punk, a farmhand who was the Scarecrow's real-life counterpart. When she got back to Kansas, the moment would have suggested that Dorothy had more intense affections for him, and he was leaving for agricultural college. Although the conclusion was cut before filming, remnants of it can still be seen. Many fans and some historians believe that Dorothy's line, "I think I'll miss you most of all. It feels more personal than the rest," was intended to represent the lost romantic conclusion, even if it never materialized. Even now, Dorothy and the Scarecrow seem to have a closer bond than the others. Judy Garland played Dorothy at the age of 16 because MGM wanted her to seem flawless. Some quite unsettling things happened. She followed a strict diet. She was instructed to survive on chicken soup, black coffee, and occasionally simply cigarettes. They gave her amphetamines to keep her alert throughout lengthy workdays. They gave her barbiturates to put her to sleep at night. This was the start of her addiction. It was not an individual decision. It was something the studio made her do. Later, Judy claimed that she felt more like property than a human. She was addicted to both types of drugs. By the time the shoot was over, she battled addiction for the remainder of her life before passing away from an unintentional overdose at the age of 47. She began all of this as a teenager, merely attempting to comply with the demands of those in authority. The Munchkin actors were the subject of another tale that persisted for decades. There were 124 of them, and according to stories, they trashed their hotel, partied every night, and got wasted. At one point, Judy Garland made a joke about the cops using butterfly nets to catch them. The misbehavior had some truth to it. The most of the stories were exaggerated. However, one actor was discovered intoxicated in a restroom, while others were said to have flirted with dancers. They only earned $50 a week, according to Jerry Marin, who played the Lollipop Kid, which was less than the dog that played Toto. He clarified that the majority of Munchkin actors had demanding jobs and lacked the funds and leisure for extravagant celebrations. The others remained professional, but a few caused issues. The wildest moments garnered the greatest attention, which is why the legend endured. There is a much darker rumor about the movie that is among the most well-known. The body was spotted hanging in the background of a scene, leading many to fear that a Munchkin actor had committed suicide while filming. Around the 48-minute mark, Dorothy and her pals are walking through the woodland. But there was nothing human about that dark creature. It was avian. To add realism to the forest, MGM had imported huge birds, such as emus and cranes, from the Los Angeles Zoo. The birds' wing movements are seen in more recent iterations of the film. No one died on that shoot, and no actor went missing, but the idea persisted due to the grainy appearance of outdated VHS tapes. Before it became part of Hollywood folklore, it was simply a miscommunication that was handed down through the years. The majority of people are also unaware that the film was directed by 5 different people. Norman Taurog, who worked during planning, was the first. Then, in October 1938, Richard Thorpe took over and filmed for 2 weeks. Dorothy sported a blonde wig and a lot of makeup in his version. She didn't resemble the kind girl we knew. George Cukor temporarily replaced Thorpe when he was sacked. After instructing Judy to remove the wig, he assisted her in achieving her natural appearance. The majority of the film was then directed by Victor Fleming. However, he went to work on Gone with the Wind just before it was completed. The final scenes, such as the well-known Over the Rainbow and Everything in Kansas, were finished by King Vidor. The credits still solely include Victor Fleming's name in spite of all these modifications. Given how many hands created the film behind the scenes, it's almost a marvel that it feels so cohesive now. The truth about what it was like to be a contract actor at MGM in the 1930s is finally revealed. Judy Garland and others had very no freedom. Their roles, weight, and appearance were all chosen by the studio. Journalist Alexander Walker dubbed the system Star Surfing. As Clark Gable famously remarked, "I am paid not to think." They handle even the biggest stars like instruments. They might be compelled to work until they were exhausted, made to watch movies they didn't like, and disciplined if they didn't. Schedules were harsh, diets were rigid, and anyone who voiced dissatisfaction ran the risk of being publicly humiliated or banned. Although it appeared glitzy on the outside, it was a system based on silence, fear, and control. In The Magician of Oz, the magician appeared strong and enigmatic, but behind the curtain, he was simply a regular guy employing smoke, lights, and sound. This notion of someone feigning power while concealing the reality felt like a warning in 1939. It was interpreted by many spectators as a critique of elites and politicians. Scholars later claimed that the wizard reminded them of real political figures from the late 19th century, particularly those who concealed their lack of genuine answers with charm and lofty promises. No one's issues could be resolved by the wizard. To maintain control, he only offered fictitious answers.